Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us, having the Spanish delegation. We are all very happy. I'm talking on my behalf, but I think I reflect their feelings as well. So thank you so much, ADIA, for having us. I think it's a very special day for multiple reasons. So let me tell you a little bit about my recent research, and so we can continue afterwards with other talks and the special roundtable. So I'm going to be talking about a new application of Twitter and how we can get social data in order to provide some insights for economic analysis. And let me say that, as has been indicated before, it's very crucial to talk about data nowadays, and particularly in economics. There was an inspiring paper published in Science 2014 that told us, well, how much and how successful we will be in the future looking at new, different venues of exploring new data sets. They were referring basically to online data. They were not imagining or foreseeing all the richness of data that is now available. But thanks God, data has become something unlimited in a way. And furthermore, if we also look at the profession, we are leaving aside the theoretical, more theoretical perspective of our work, or not leaving it aside, but giving also a lot of importance to the empirics. And there's a very interesting paper on, that Hammerschmidt published, looking at the top 60 years of publications in economics. Who publishes it, where, and how, and what. And what he describes there is that until the 1980s, most papers were pure theoretical papers. From the 80s onwards, we are looking at a huge amount of papers published on empirics, on empirical questions addressed with empirical data. So we are certainly in a very good place here at ADIA, looking at new data sources and new potential implementations. Furthermore, the 2021 Nobel Prize, and this has been, I didn't change it, I'm really happy to see that Dr. Imbens has joined ADIA. And certainly that's an example of how important empiricism is becoming in economics. This is something, as I say, very spectacular, because we were a very conservative field, if I may say. And when we look at climate change, certainly data on climate is an issue. We all are very well aware that climate change is one of the major crucial issues of the 21st century. However, when we look at economics and social sciences, data on climate change, the climate change perception, is missing. It's not internationally available, it's not comparable, it's not rich, and at times it's not trustful either. So we have significant problems in terms of data in economics, in terms of even what is called now-casing to understand what's happening right now, and particularly for forecasting. So, as some examples, I could tell you that in Europe, the latest source of information in terms of climate change is the Eurobarometer published in 2019 with some specific data about perceptions of climate change. But this only happens for a few countries and only in 2019. Now it's 2023, and we don't have official statistics yet. So I'm very particularly interested in looking at data and new fields of data, and particularly text as data. And why is that? Because this emerges from social media, which is rather broad nowadays. It can be internationally comparable, very rich in terms of quantity and quality, and it can provide lots of insights how people perceive or is concerned about climate change or other elements. And in particular, I'm looking at sentiment analysis, or I'm employing sentiment analysis to look at these very large amounts of text that has been gathered in social media. There are potential contributions that can be made in the field. Our field in economics has looked at well-being issues, and for a long period of time. And they have addressed that in terms of surveys. So the traditional economics uses surveys in order to gather data, for instance, on stated well-being. A question that usually is being posed is, okay, how happy you are with the standard conditions you have nowadays, for example. Or how satisfied do you feel with your job? How satisfied do you feel with your standard living conditions? These are important questions that are being addressed year after year in many countries. And they started basically in the US in the 1950s at the University of Wisconsin. And they're taken seriously by government. Because if we are not able to increase the subjective well-being, so what are we doing here? because we are supposed to be increasing the subjective well-being of individuals as well. So nowadays, there are lots of opening opportunities to look at social media data in order to gather information of how people feel and how people understand perceptions towards different events. And it's also very important to look at this type of data because this is fully open. That means it's universal. That means that you don't have to apply for any permission to download it. Anyone can download this data. And I am putting a lot of emphasis on making my research more open, more transparent, and more accessible to everyone. So there has been already different initiatives. One of them has been provided by the United Nations, which also look how Twitter, how users around the world were looking or were writing messages in Twitter about climate change. And what I'm going to be presenting is not only looking at how people is writing and talking about weather, temperature, climate change, global warming, but also what we can understand and what kind of correlations at least we can gather from the data. So I put together a very large data set that contains globally more than 1,000 million tweets worldwide. And this has been written in 2 languages, in Spanish and in English. And with that, I also use information coming from statistics, open data that allow me to generate some correlations, and also, of course, weather data. Unfortunately, you may not be able to see it, but what I usually use is basically a single tweet. I don't use the retweet. We could talk about what are the reasons for that, but there are plenty of reasons for that. And I'm focusing on geo-referentiated tweets. That means geotag tweets that I know where are the coordinates of the user when he or she wrote that message. And that's very important for me to focus on geotag data so that I can construct a panel data set because I know the precise location probably where this individual is living. And I also learn the behavior of tweeting or writing, right? So with that in mind, I can set up a large panel data set worldwide. I may ask for showing the video so that you get a glance of how my data set looks like. Because in the research group, we only have knowledge of English and Spanish. These are the languages in which we are collecting data. But of course, we could also collect it in Arabic and open a lot of collaborations here and in other places. But you see a feeling of, you can see seasonality, and you can see a lot of dispersion also, geographical dispersion. But basically, I'm showing this because I want you to understand that we are looking at climate change from the perspective of being a global problem that should be addressed in a global direction. Thank you. So we have rich data sets, as I was saying. One is in Spanish. This is like an intensity of frequencies for the Spanish data set. The next one is in Spain. If you are familiar with Spain, probably you know that the southern part is warmer, in addition to also the central part. However, conversations related to weather, to high temperatures, occur almost all over. So this is a good representation of how intense also people are perceiving the changes in temperatures in Spain. This is my English data set. So as you observe, climate and weather are very recurrent topics worldwide. So there's almost no place on the face of the earth that they talk about climate and concerns related to that. And basically what we do in this exercise that I have 4 minutes to tell you about is we collect this massive amount of tweets, we clean them, they go through a large relative process of tokenization and organization, and then we run some sentiment analysis algorithm based on libraries. In this particular case, we have just 2 libraries, there are many others, and we obtain sentiment scores. These vectors of sentiments, that I'm going to show you just in a second how they are being generated, are merged with other socioeconomic data, with climate data, with extreme events, and others. So basically, we rely on natural language processing. So these sentences written in Twitter, they become vectors, which are cleaned up and organized so that afterwards are checked in dictionaries. We use very simple framework. Of course, we could use very sophisticated and much more modern natural language processing algorithms, but these are the basic standard ones in which each word is associated with a particular level. Let's say a party will have a very high level of happiness. A person who writes about a party. That will be given, for instance, a score, I think it's 9, actually, in the MLB library. Other elements, such as terrorism or death, are very negative talks. So they will be given a very low score. And with that, there are different formulas that are going to be applied depending on the algorithms we employ, so that we generate, for each particular topic, a score of a sentiment. Or we can aggregate it by individual level. So we know who are more concerned about certain topics and who are not. We have a very large data set. These are only the geotag tweets worldwide. I am selecting the Spanish data set so that I show you some data on Latin American countries, because usually these are much less studied, and we know very little about climate change in developing countries and Latin America in particular, and some of them in the poorest countries. These are frequencies of how people talk and write about climate change. You will see that before COVID-19, it was a major issue talking about it. Then after 2020, there were already other important issues on the table. It became not such a relative topic, and now it becomes again rather important on social media. If we look at the conversations, and I have to be closing, as you see, there is a high emphasis at the beginning. There is talks about climate change in Spanish, also string events, but there is also a lot of talking about weather. The weather is changing, the weather is becoming worse, etc. Now, as you observe in 2022, the conversation about weather has been eliminated, basically, and individuals talk about climate change and string events, basically. So there is increasing tendency of talking about direct climate change and other events. These are the sentiments that are decreasing over time for all Latin American countries except Costa Rica. And in the case of English-speaking countries, I have to say that there has been also a decrease on sentiment after COVID-19, but not for all countries, not all English-speaking countries, but many of them. All in all, what I can show you is also that in Spain there is happening a profound change that we are analyzing. We're using an open data set. This is our protocol. We want open data, so anyone can use it. And we can estimate the marginal rate of substitution between these sentiments we obtain and income, meaning, okay, how much income I should give to a person in order to compensate higher temperatures in the future, for example. These are the maps of our tweets. We have highly granulated data. This data is combined with weather data from the IMET. And we also have additional supports for other controls coming from OpenStreetMaps, among other sources. We have done a topic analysis, but I want to show you this map, and with that I will be closing. These are the sentiments extracted from this very large amount of conversations happening in Spain. These are 2019 conversations. These are the sentiments related to 2019. These are the sentiments related to 2022. And the message is that the sentiment related to climate change has decreased considerably, meaning that individuals are becoming more concerned about weather, about extreme events, and climate change during this period of time. And we can do that also by municipality, and we can even go much thinner than that. So in sum, there are many things we can do. I am not going to use the time that we have allocated for other activities now, but this is an example of how many things we can do, and also how we could use in the future these estimates to be included in IMA work and try to improve social cost of carbon calculations, considering that there are many intangibles that have not been included in previous IAM models. And with that, I close. Thank you so much. And hopefully in the future, I can tell you more.